The sun had just set over the small village, casting a warm orange glow over the thatched roofs and the bustling town square. The air was filled with the sweet smell of freshly baked bread wafting from the nearby bakery, and the sound of children's laughter as they played in the streets. In a tiny shop, nestled between the bakery and a flower stand, the shoemaker sat hunched over his workbench, stitching together a beautiful pair of leather shoes. The shoemaker was a kind and gentle soul, with a heart full of love for his craft and the people of the village. He worked tirelessly from dawn till dusk, creating shoes that were not only sturdy and comfortable but also beautiful and unique. As he worked, he would often sing softly to himself, his voice like a warm breeze on a summer day. The villagers loved the shoemaker, and they would often bring him small gifts, like a basket of fresh fruit or a jug of creamy milk, to show their appreciation for his hard work. As the night wore on, the village grew quieter, and the shoemaker's shop became a cozy haven, filled with the warm scent of leather and the soft glow of candlelight. The shoemaker's eyes began to droop, and he yawned, stretching his tired back and shoulders. He had been working for hours, and he was looking forward to a well-deserved rest. Just as he was about to put away his tools and retire for the night, he noticed a faint rustling sound coming from the back of the shop. At first, the shoemaker thought it was just the wind or a stray animal, but then he heard the sound again, this time followed by the faint whisper of voices. He looked around, wondering who could be there, but he saw no one. The voices grew louder, and the shoemaker could make out the words, "We must work quickly, the night is young, and the shoemaker needs our help." Suddenly, a tiny figure emerged from the shadows, no bigger than the shoemaker's thumb. The tiny figure was an elf, with delicate wings and a mischievous grin. He was dressed in a tiny cloak and hat, and he carried a small bag of tools and threads. The shoemaker's eyes widened in wonder as more elves appeared, each one busier than the last, scurrying about the shop, measuring, cutting, and stitching. The shoemaker watched in amazement, feeling as though he had stumbled into a magical world, hidden from the rest of the village. "Who are you?" the shoemaker asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The lead elf looked up, his eyes twinkling with kindness, and replied, "We are the elves, and we have come to help you, dear shoemaker, for we have heard of your kindness and your beautiful shoes." The elves began to work, their fingers moving quickly and surely as they stitched and shaped the leather. The shoemaker watched, mesmerized, as the shoes began to take shape, each one more beautiful than the last. The elves worked in silence, their only sound the soft hum of their sewing, and the occasional whisper of beautiful or perfect as they inspected their work. As the night wore on, the shoemaker found himself growing sleepier, the sound of the elves sewing lulling him into a peaceful calm. The room grew quieter, the only sound the soft rustling of the elves' movements, and the shoemaker's gentle breathing. The candles flickered, casting a warm, golden light over the room, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of leather and the soft whisper of the elves' voices. The shoemaker's eyes grew heavy, and he let out a soft sigh, feeling the warmth and comfort of the elves' presence. As he drifted off to sleep, he smiled, knowing that he was not alone, and that the elves were there to help him, and to bring joy and beauty to his life. The elves continued to work, their fingers moving softly, as they created their magic, and the shoemaker slept, surrounded by the peacefulness of the night, and the gentle kindness of the elves. The night wore on, and the shoemaker slept, surrounded by the soft glow of the candles and the gentle hum of the elves' sewing. The elves worked quietly, their fingers moving quickly and surely as they stitched and shaped the leather. The room was filled with the sweet scent of leather and the soft whisper of the elves' voices, and the shoemaker's gentle breathing was the only sound that broke the silence. As the hours passed, the elves finished their work, and they stepped back to admire their creations. The shoes were beautiful, each one more lovely than the last, with intricate stitching and delicate designs. The elves nodded to each other, satisfied with their work, and then they began to clean and tidy the shop. They swept the floor, and put away the tools and threads, and they made sure that everything was in its place. The shoemaker slept on, unaware of the elves' activity, and the elves worked quietly, so as not to disturb him. As the first light of dawn began to creep into the sky, the elves finished their work, and they stood back to admire the shop. It was tidy and neat, with everything in its place, and the shoes were lined up on the shelves, waiting for the customers to arrive. The elves nodded to each other, and then they turned to the shoemaker, who was still sleeping peacefully. They smiled, and they whispered to each other, "He is a kind man, and he deserves our help." The lead elf reached out, and he gently touched the shoemaker's shoulder, and the shoemaker stirred, waking up to the sound of the elves' gentle voices. He opened his eyes, and he looked around, taking in the tidy shop and the beautiful shoes that lined the shelves. He smiled, and he sat up, rubbing his eyes, and he looked at the elves, who were standing around him, smiling. "Thank you," the shoemaker said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You have done a wonderful job, and I am so grateful for your help." The elves bowed, and they smiled, and the lead elf said, "It was our pleasure, dear shoemaker. We are always happy to help those who are kind and gentle." The shoemaker nodded, and he stood up, stretching his back and shoulders. He looked around the shop, taking in the beautiful shoes and the tidy workspace. He felt a sense of peace and contentment, knowing that he had the elves' help, and that they would always be there to support him. The elves began to disappear, one by one, until only the lead elf was left. He smiled, and he said, "We will return tonight, dear shoemaker, and we will continue to help you. But for now, we must go, and let you start your day." The shoemaker nodded, and he smiled, and he watched as the lead elf disappeared into the shadows. The shoemaker was left alone, but he did not feel lonely. He felt grateful, and he felt at peace, knowing that he had the elves' help, and that they would always be there to support him. He took a deep breath, and he let the calmness of the night wash over him, and he felt his heart fill with joy and contentment. He smiled, and he began to prepare for the day, knowing that it would be a beautiful day, filled with kindness and wonder. The sun was rising, casting a warm, golden light over the shop, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of leather, and the gentle whisper of the elves' voices. The shoemaker felt his heart fill with joy, and he knew that he would always treasure the memory of the elves' visit, and the kindness they had shown him. He took a deep breath, and he let the peacefulness of the moment wash over him, and he felt his heart fill with calmness and serenity. The day was beginning, and the shoemaker was ready, knowing that he had the elves' help, and that they would always be there to support him. The shoemaker walked to the window, and he looked outside, watching as the sun rose higher in the sky. The light was golden, and it cast a warm glow over the streets, and the houses, and the trees. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers, and the gentle chirping of birds. The shoemaker smiled, and he felt a sense of peace and contentment wash over him. He knew that it was going to be a beautiful day, filled with kindness, and wonder, and joy. He turned away from the window, and he began to prepare for the day. He lit a fire, and he made some tea, and he sat down at his workbench, surrounded by the beautiful shoes that the elves had made. He took a sip of his tea, and he closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the fire, and the peace of the moment. He listened to the sound of the birds outside, and the gentle hum of the wind through the trees. As he sat there, the shoemaker felt his heart fill with gratitude and love. He thought about the elves, and their kindness, and their help. He thought about the beautiful shoes they had made, and the way they had tidied up the shop. He felt a sense of wonder and magic, and he knew that he would never forget the elves' visit. The morning passed slowly, and the shoemaker worked quietly, making new shoes, and repairing old ones. The sun rose higher in the sky, and the light filled the shop, casting a warm glow over everything. The air was filled with the sweet scent of leather, and the gentle sound of the shoemaker's tools. As the day wore on, the shoemaker began to feel tired, and he knew that it was time to rest. He put down his tools, and he stood up, stretching his back and his shoulders. He walked to the window, and he looked outside, watching as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the streets, and the houses, and the trees. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers, and the gentle chirping of birds. The shoemaker smiled, and he felt a sense of peace and contentment. He knew that it had been a beautiful day, filled with kindness, and wonder, and joy. He turned away from the window, and he walked to his chair, and he sat down, feeling the softness of the cushion, and the warmth of the fire. The shoemaker closed his eyes, and he let the peacefulness of the moment wash over him. He listened to the sound of the birds outside, and the gentle hum of the wind through the trees. He felt his heart fill with calmness and serenity, and he knew that he was at peace. The world outside was quiet and still, and the shoemaker felt his own heart become quiet and still. The darkness gathered, and the stars began to twinkle in the sky. The shoemaker's breathing slowed, and his body relaxed, and he felt himself drifting off to sleep. The last thing he heard was the gentle whisper of the elves' voices, and the soft sound of their footsteps, as they returned to the shop, to help him once again. The shoemaker smiled, and he felt his heart fill with joy and contentment, and he knew that he was safe and loved. And with that, he fell asleep, surrounded by the peace and the quiet of the night.